Snatching big fish away from Kirby Smart. That's not easy to do. Florida State on a roll in recruiting in the top 10 in the nation. And again, with a big get this week, we will discuss. And also the transfer portal always at the forefront as well this time of year. And especially, of course, with the portal open for the next couple of weeks. Welcome into Florida State Seminoles Live here at the Voice of College Football. We do it up big each and every Wednesday at 6 Eastern time. We got Chris Frazier here from Spear Addicts. Chris, what's going on today?
Oh, just trying to make sure that I keep up with everybody that's entering the transfer portal, not just from Florida State, because Florida State's going to potentially be looking in the transfer portal to get a couple of depth pieces, possibly a starter. So just paying attention to everybody that jumps into the portal. So I'm ready for when they're ready.
Yeah, so let's hit the transfer portal because that's the most recent news before we get to the big commit out of Georgia. Antavious Woody, redshirted, was on the scout team, didn't necessarily make an impact on the field, but a couple key contributors over the last couple seasons. Now, Steven Dix obviously had his best season as a freshman with 45 tackles, less impact, but certainly a bit interesting that he's made this decision. And then obviously Brendan Gant on the defensive side of the ball as well. So if we take them one at a time, just your thoughts about those decisions and those losses.
Well, I think the biggest scenario is both of them were looking for more than a special teams job or more than a role. They wanted to be starters. They wanted to be that guy. And there's a lot of ball clubs right now that both of them could be that guy. They could be that starting position. And with Florida State, you know, who they were recruited by and now whom's at the realm of the defense is two different things. They would have fit perfect in what Willie Taggart was putting together. They would have been that type of linebacker or DB that was needed. Now that Fuller has taken over and Randy Shannon is now the co-defensive coordinator, they don't fit the system for them to be that guy. Like Amari Gaynor earlier this year, when they hadn't entered the transfer portal now, I think he's at North Carolina. He's more of a 3-4 coverage guy as far as a linebacker goes. And it's kind of the same fit with Diggs and Gant as well. They just don't fit the exact scheme that we're putting together. I think both of them could have been vital pieces, especially on special teams as Gant was. Diggs could have been a good role player. He could have came in when necessary, but they just looking to get closer to the end of their career in college. They're looking to be that guy and put that impact out there to where they can become draftable in the NFL. And it probably just wasn't going to happen at Florida State. Not a lot of NFL teams are looking for special team gurus as far as players. They're looking for impact on each side of the ball. Not that special teams isn't important, but these gentlemen are looking for a better situation than what they could get here at Florida State. It's not, necessarily that they've been recruited over. It's just they don't fit the scheme, so they kind of have been recruited over.
Yeah, so specifically with Steven Dix, do you think that's what happened? Because here's a guy that stepped onto campus and immediately, bam, impact, 44 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, and he's pretty much disappeared since then.
Yeah, with Diggs, it's a weird. I want to say it's a weird scenario because I personally it kind of hurts to see him go because I personally thought he was going to be a piece that Florida State was going to utilize this year. I thought he was going to be a guy that could potentially step into a starting position, but the coaches saw otherwise. This was one of those exit interviews or mutual decisions. Both parties decided that it would be best for him to move on. It wasn't that Dix decided this isn't working for him or Florida State decided this isn't working for us and they had to press either one of each other too hard. It was they both agreed that the way that he would be utilized here at Florida State wasn't good enough for him, and it also wasn't good enough for Florida State. So it is weird because he was an instant impact. The issue, I think, comes into when you have like Cypress come in, and if he was to move down to play linebacker a little bit, you've got Omar Graham Jr. that fits the system better, because Omar showed a lot of potential his true freshman year, which was last year. To me, it stings a little bit with Dix, because he did make an impact when he first got here.
Big game, James Coleman joining us. Den Media Group. Get on over there. We'll drop the link in the chat, as well as Spearatics, to check out the latest from James. James, what's going on tonight?
Not much, man. Just hanging out. Got spring ball out of the way, so now we're on to off season, and we're 136 days away, 137 days away from LSU.
Sounds good. Sounds like about 4 months, so that makes sense. James, appreciate you being here. Good to see you. We were talking about the guys that have departed through the transfer portal, although not officially departed. Of course, they've entered the transfer portal, and about 95% of the time, at least, these guys do move on. So there's that rare case in which a player decides to come back. But Steven Dix made an impact as a freshman on a pretty poor team, albeit 2020, of course. And then his playing time has dwindled since then. We talked about Brendan Gant, and Antavious Woody was a top 25 interior offensive lineman in the 2020 recruiting class. So, James, what stands out to you in regards to these three decisions?
Well, I believe Woody had to make the switch over in the spring to go try to play D-line, to try to figure out where to maximize his ability. And when you look at what Darrell Jackson, you look at Fisk, you look at Io, who's technically supposed to be a freshman this year. He came in a whole class ahead. And a couple other guys that kind of just really solidified themselves. You're in a crowded room, and when you're trying to learn that position, Gant and Dix Gant's a situation where you got to play. No matter how good of a person you are, the goal is to get an opportunity, and he was just going to be a rotational guy at best. Same thing with Dix. When you look at what Omar Graham Jr. has been able to do since he's got there, they're bringing in Nicholson from out of California. You've got DJ Lundy still there. So you've got, on top of Tatum Bethune, as well as Kalen DeLoach, we run a 4-2-5. So you're running out of linebacker slots. You could only, being too deep is a blessing, but potentially being 3 deep and being that fourth guy on there, it means you're never going to see the field. So why not go ahead and take your chances, start brand new somewhere else?
Shut me up if I made this statement the other night. So we did a special edition with James and Chris the other night on Sunday night to wrap up the spring game, or the sixth grade graduation, I believe is what we can put in parentheses there. But had a good time with James and Chris, so check that out. But from the time the transfer portal really started to heat up about 3 years ago, of course, it was a quarterback-driven thing that a lot of people talked about it being a quarterback situation, because that's the one position you only have one guy playing. So you could be really good, be sitting behind a superstar, and you need to move on so you can play. Then the next bucket of players that I got accustomed to seeing were, and you bring up Fisk, and he's a perfect example of this. Lowly ranked coming out of high school, lowly regarded, doesn't get a look by Power 5 teams, signs up with a MAC school in his case, or a group of 5, plays really well, really productive. The scouts love him. He's turned himself into a player. Now he wants to break into the big time, show what he can do against the big boys, set himself up for the NFL draft. Now I'm seeing another bucket of players, and I made this comment about 10 days before the portal opened on the 15th, and I thought, this is the next wave of players that we're seeing. And so for this being the spring of 23, we're seeing the 22 class. Now, the opposite of the Fisk type situation, we're seeing highly regarded guys coming out of high school, like top 50, 100 players, Bear Alexander, others, 3 of them coming out of Oregon that were all top 150 guys coming out of high school that didn't get a chance to play for whatever reason, didn't fit the scheme, didn't catch on, didn't work hard enough, whatever their issues were, couldn't get on the field as freshmen. Now going into their either redshirt freshman season or their sophomore season, they're saying, well, the writing's on the wall. I'm not going to be on the field maybe this time around. And we're seeing a lot of the really top end 22 guys in the transfer portal now.
Okay, so here's what I always tell people. I can go on the field and I can see who the Division I guys, who the college players are when I'm watching a game. They stand out. Doesn't matter if they run a 5 foot, they just look faster than everybody else. And typically it's hard to it's nitpicking when you're looking at certain characteristics. But there are some guys who fully stand out. One of those guys that I've seen, Dalvin Cook. I just realized how long I've been kind of pseudo doing media when I realized my first ever ranking for a writing service, there used to be something called Florida Varsity. They asked me to name the top 5 running backs in that class. I named Dalvin Cook, Dalvin Cook's teammate who was committed to Florida State, who ended up going to Miami. Then Sony Michel, who's a 5-star who went to Georgia. And then there was a couple other guys. But I remember when I put Dalvin Cook number 1, everybody said I was crazy. But when I watched this film, I saw a film of him separating from naturally fast teams. And so I say that by a guy who's watched it, done camps, did different things. But what happened in 2020, in the early March of 2020, that made everything change was the fact that we had to shut down. We went into quarantine. So you didn't have any camps, whether it be school camps, exposure camps. You didn't have workouts at high schools. You didn't have anything happening. People didn't even know. They weren't even going to class for the rest of that year. We didn't find out that we were going to have a football season until, in some cases, until August. Everything got pushed back. Then they still weren't allowing visits. Fans weren't even allowed in stands in some cases. So you missed a whole recruiting cycle for 2021, which also puts you behind for 2022. And that's why and then when 2022 came, you started seeing these rankings and questions started getting asked. I still have these questions. They get mad at me when I ask, what is a 5-star? What are the characteristics of a 5-star athlete? Are there 30 things? Let's say there's 50 things that a 5-star athlete has to have 42 of those to be checked off. I respect it. And then a 4-star has to have 35 or 30. And then a 3-star has to have 20 or 25. And then everybody else is under that. You ask them, they can't give you any measurables because it's not just film. Because some kids only have 500 yards receiving, but they're a high 4-star athlete. What film did you have? What are you analyzing? What are you doing? So when you take that away, you're seeing guys get ranked off of relationships, and you're seeing the true basis behind 90% of the rankings. It's not about if the player's good. It's about where they're coming out of and who they're being told to rank. And that's something that I think is really unfortunate. Now, I'm not saying Nick Saban doesn't know how to recruit kids, but Nick Saban took a kid that was local out of Jacksonville that I think is a good kid. I don't think he's an Alabama product, though. But Nick Saban took him, and now he's out. Nick Saban also took a 4-star corner from the 2022 class that just decided that he doesn't want to be in there. So that's why I think you're seeing a lot of guys starting to get spit out, because a lot of coaches took gambles where they weren't able to really do the reliable research that they're normally able to do. So, and then now where they can do it, in this 23 class and in the 24 class, you're able to see these kids. These kids are able to get a little bit more development. Now you're starting to say, okay, well, man, I think we could do better right here, and then we can go get somebody from the portal, and so on and so on. And so just imagine how many more Fisk are out there. My guy right now for us, Jared Verse, is another example of a guy who was under recruited and now was able to go on a lower level, produce, and then now everybody wants him. So I think you'll see more of that. But that's my conspiracy theory to why kids are starting to hit that portal.
And my conspiracy behind this, not of why they're hitting the portal, but how they end up being such high-touted players and end up needing to hit the transfer portal. And I'm not going to say every college across the country does this, but your Alabamas, your Georgias, your Ohio States, your Michigans, the top guys, I think these coaches take kids knowing that they're never going to play them just so nobody else gets them, so that they don't become a problem for them down the road. Like if they play against us, he's going to cause a problem. He doesn't necessarily fit what we want to do, and he's not necessarily better than the guy that I have in this position or the next two, but I'm going to make sure that I get him off the board because we can, and then we'll deal with him a year later or 2 years later when he hits the transfer portal. I mean, NFL does it all the time. They take people off the market they don't necessarily need just so they don't end up being a foe in that division. So I think a lot of the characteristics that the NFL does is starting to fall down into the college set of football play because, I mean, if you could stop Derrick Henry from being on another team, would you do it? Because I know that I would. If I could stop Dalvin Cook from going to Florida State and doing what he did to Miami for years, would you do it? So now that we're in this transfer portal era and we're in these situations to where we don't necessarily need that top class because Bama and Georgia are doing it year in and year out, Ohio State included, they have a top 3, top 5 class every year. Are they literally going to use every one of these kids? Probably not. As you can see with Bama, they're losing 3 or 4, and Georgia's got 3 or 4 in immediately. Now, these kids could go and probably be huge impact players anywhere else in the country. But at least they kept them off the market for a year not to be a problem and get adjusted to that system. That's my conspiracy theory on why they do it.
Yeah, I think that goes all the way back to Bear Bryant being the most famous for that when there were no scholarship limits. Just I'm grabbing as many guys as I can, keep them away from Auburn and LSU, put them on my team, and I may not necessarily play them, but I'm not going to have to deal with them. And I can't say that I necessarily understand that. So the point that James hit, I totally understand. If you're Florida State and you can get Dalvin Cook and his second choice was Miami, that's a double win because you see Miami on the field every year. So you not only got Dalvin Cook, but you don't have to defend Dalvin Cook. As opposed to we're in a recruiting battle with Ohio State. We lost. Okay, we're most likely never going to see him on the field. Okay, that was a loss. We wanted him to play for us, but we don't have to see him. In terms of keeping players away from other teams and then not playing them, if they're not good enough to play for you, then are you really that fearful of what they can do against you?
I think sometimes it's this. So here's a real life example of that. Tim Tebow. Tim Tebow is a phenomenal athlete. Always been that. If you didn't know what he was, he's actually one of the babies that brought us reality TV. We watched Nice High School go up against Hoover High School. And you saw Tim Tebow working out and doing all these different things. Bunch of violations, but we're not going to go into that part. But we recruited him heavily at Florida State. And it wasn't necessarily because, I'm going to be honest with you, had no idea how to use him. They just knew big kid, fast, even though he has a funky throwing motion, he has a cannon for an arm. Well, we were thinking he was going to Alabama. So we were just trying to make sure he didn't go to Florida because from what you were listening to, what Meyer wanted to do, this sounded like the perfect quarterback for him. So it's not necessarily that you would take him and that he wouldn't play for you, because I think Tim Tebow would have been a great Seminole that we got him. He was a good enough athlete and a good enough worker to where he would have rose to that. And in theory, we had Xavier Lee, who we didn't necessarily need Tim Tebow at that point, who was a five-star quarterback out of Daytona Mainland. But it's just sometimes if you can, it's not every position and every player, but sometimes if you can finagle it, and even if they don't come to you, push them somewhere else. It's just one of those tactics in football. I didn't get my offer to Florida State until I got offered to Miami.
So that's the one position I get it. Okay, we don't know what to do with Anthony Richardson. I don't know if he's going to fit our offense. I don't want him running around careless with the football. I don't want him making bad decisions for us, but I also don't want to defend the guy. I get that at the quarterback position, but if the dude's a stud defensive tackle, isn't he going to be a stud for anyone? And
yes.
why would you just keep him on your team to keep him away from somebody else if he's not good enough to play for you.
No. I think sometimes it's just greed.
Case of injuries, what I think. So, like the gentleman that's entered, the defensive tackle that entered for Georgia, I don't think Georgia necessarily wants to lose him. I think they would be fine with him keeping his scholarship and staying right there. But he knows that he's not going to start. But if Georgia was to have an injury, you better believe he's going to be the next man up, or at least the following close. He'll become a rotational piece at worst. So Georgia, I don't think, wants to lose someone at his caliber, but he's also not better than who's in front of him. But he's better than most of the guys in the country. So I think everybody tries to stockpile as many players as they can at defensive tackle, defensive end, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, DBs. I mean, I'm not trying to name the whole team, but there's specifics that coaches go in, because I've heard 2 college coaches go at it back and forth. I don't know what we're going to do with him. I just know that we don't need him anywhere else. We don't want him to go anywhere else because of what he can do. Like, I don't think a lot of people would know what to do with Tim Tebow other than Urban Meyer. I think Urban knew exactly what to do with him. Like, Bobby told Philip Bridger, was it Philip? It was one of them.
Rivers.
Told him, no, you're not good enough to come here. So think about that. Like, Philip Rivers, who went in the NFL and like created all of what he did, but he wasn't good enough to come to Florida State. Brett Favre wanted to come to Florida State. He told him no as well. He wasn't good enough. So those are the kind of things now these coaches are switching them. Well, he might not fit what we want to do, but I don't want someone else to figure out how to use him because he's that athletic. That's kind of where I base it off of. And then hearing coaches argue about, no, we're going to recruit him harder because we don't want you to have him.
Bear Alexander is the first player in the transfer portal that kind of caused a stir, that everyone wants him. You know, they saw him throw around Max Duggan a couple times in the national championship game, and he's a top 50 player coming out of high school. I see he went to IMG Academy. Is there any Florida State connection lean that gives you any kind of hope there?
I don't know. I was hopeful until I saw he's going out to USC. So this seems like one of those situations where it was already over before he hit the portal. I'm gonna be honest. I tell people this all the time. Like, this is why I say the transfer portal hasn't really changed. It's just made it a little cleaner. Their kid, when I played, we had a guy Thomas Clayton, 4-star running back out of Virginia. Thomas, he entered the transfer portal after his freshman year. He didn't beat out. Leon was clearly playing, and Lorenzo Booker was the number 1 overall prospect in the nation that was going to play, and chose the red shirt. But Thomas talked to his coach, and he had 5 official visits listed the minute he got his walking papers. They told him where he couldn't go, and he obliged by it, and then had Michigan State, ended up going to K-State. And, I think a lot of times the same thing happens. Like, I may or may not know a lot more than I'm giving on. I don't want to hurt anybody, but sometimes it's like, hey, if I left, what would you think these guys would think? And, they kind of test the waters before they leave. So I think Bear had an idea that somebody was going to go. But then there's guys like some of the guys that have left Florida State. They had no idea. They were just going out there, rolling the dice. And now they're in a situation where they got to make a huge life decision in a couple of days. Because what's today? It's the 19th today, right? Oh, well, no, that's person. One of them's a grad transfer, so he's fine. But a lot of these other guys got to make life decisions before the 30th. So, but Bears, I don't think Bear or the linebacker from the linebacker from Georgia are both from Florida. I don't think that we get them.
So the good news on the week is obviously Landen Thomas, the big tight end out of Georgia, that landed at Florida State when it came down to the Dogs, the national champions, and the Noles. And Mike Norvell makes this move and gets a top tight end in the country, top 25 player. This has to put a big smile on both of your faces.
What's even cooler about it is that's three guys from out of the state of Georgia. You got We got our quarterback, Luke Cromenhall. You got Cam Davis. And now you got this kid who actually was committed to Florida State before he was committed to Georgia. So to quote my boy CJ Wilson and his joke, it's always get your girl back season. No matter if you lose her, you go sing enough love songs and stand outside of her door, you might be able to get her back. So this is a great pickup for Coach Thompson. And it looks like, and the cool thing about Landen is the minute he committed, he went and talked to Fox. And then there's another 4-star tight end that has more measurables like Murlock than him. So if we're able to show what we can do with Jaheim Bell, Landen Thomas is going to be way comfortable with this. And then if we show what we can do with Biscuit, which is Marquise Douglas and Kyle Murlock, I mean, then it's even then we might become tight end in a relatively short amount of time.
Any thoughts on this one, Chris?
I have been telling people for quite some time that Landen Thomas was one that you keep your eyes on because of how many times he came to Florida State. I mean, he literally was there every weekend. He was starting to show up on Wednesdays, like just out of nowhere, the kid would show up. And I really think it's because of the practices that he got to see from Florida State and Jaheim Bell that got that extra energy back into him to want to come to Florida State. Seeing how they were going to utilize Jaheim Bell, him being a very similar type player, he was already, like James said, was already committed to Florida State in 2021. We had a terrible season, so he opened his recruitment back up. And, of course, when the best of the best wants you on there, you go check it out, and they do their due diligence on recruiting you. You commit to Georgia knowing that Florida State's in your back pocket. He knew that he was going to come back to Florida State multiple times. And each and every time that he came back, it just felt more and more right. We also landed B.J. Gibson, a 4-star athlete. We landed another 4-star. I don't want to butcher his name, but these two wide receivers that we landed right before Landen Thomas did not get the amount of hype because they're not Landen Thomas. But Florida State, as far as the recruiting trail goes, has been heating up and like literally going temperature by temperature. It gets a little bit warmer, then a little bit warmer, and then finally something explodes with someone like Landen Thomas. And I've seen a comment on here where someone said that we seem to be doing really good on the offensive side of the ball. I would like to see the defense fire up. Well, all I can say is get ready. Don't forget about CJ Hurd, even though they dropped him down to a 3-star. Don't worry about the stars with those specific gentlemen. Just trust me, they're good. But you're fixing to have a safety that's in this country now at the top of his class that's eventually going to commit to Florida State. You've also got, I'm hoping that this linebacker stays true to what I think he's about to do, and he commits to Florida State. And then we've got a couple of cornerbacks that are going to potentially be committing to Florida State. I personally think our offense is going to be phenomenal. And James and I have talked about this multiple times on Spear Addicts. We want linebacker recruiting to heat up. We want it to get better. We don't quite understand what we're doing at that position. And then all of a sudden we land someone, but he's a developmental project at best. But from the rumors that I'm hearing about who's coming to campus and who we're trying to land, we're going to be fine. And then don't worry about Patrick Surtain, the new DB's coach. He's got plenty of guys that he's about to pull in and that Florida State's going to land. So our defense, what we can take up to 24, am I correct?
25, I think.
25, yeah. So I think this is going to be one of the larger classes that Norvell's taken since being the head coach. Usually we take 16 to 19. This year, I think you make it over the 20 mark. And Florida State's going to be fine on the defensive side of the ball. You're going to start seeing those guys land.
Some of you folks love this show and they love this channel so much. You know what you could do? You could sponsor us. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Let me know. And we will share with you how we can benefit you. If you need more benefit than that, then hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail, and I'll let you know what we can deliver here at the Voice of College Football, Florida State. James, we just dropped your link in the chat. It's Den Media Group, everyone. Get on over, check out James' work. What do you got working this week, James?
Man, I ain't gonna lie to you. This week I'm chilling. I'm tired. That tailgate whooped my behind. So we'll be putting up some reels, some highlight stuff. There's a couple giveaways for somebody who may be local to Jacksonville that we may be giving away some concert tickets that we got hooked up with. But right now everything is going full speed ahead to opening day. Orlando versus LSU. There's a big game, but there's a bigger tailgate that'll be playing. And I just encourage all FSU fans. Listen, I know this sounds out of the box, right? I would encourage you to just go to Orlando. Don't worry about tickets. Be there. If you're on Church Street, like where the Citrus Bowl is, you'll feel the energy. You'll hear the crowd. You'll hear all of that stuff. And at our tailgate, we'll have multiple TVs and multiple lots. So I would just drop the $60 if you can't. And if you can get a ticket, go in the stadium. If not, just come on and hang out. And you'll actually see a bunch of former players do that, because that's what a lot of guys did for the bowl game. They just stayed out in the parking lot and watched the game and just had more fun. And it's better to listen to guys like Leroy Smith give commentary on defense than to listen to actual. I learned a lot. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I thought the play was bad. I was ready to bash somebody, and then Leroy explained why the play wasn't that bad, and I was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. Still ain't work out in our favor, but it was good.
And that's a Sunday night game, right? Again, this year?
Sunday night. Yep. So Saturday we'll have plenty of stuff. Sunday night's the game. I believe more than likely will be prime time, like we were last time. Both teams will probably be top 10 coming into it. So it's going to be a lot of implications. So people are going to be pumped. LSU fans, you're more than welcome to come out too.
I always make the excuse when I get invited to games that I got to cover everyone, and there's no way I can go focus my whole weekend on one game because I'm trying to cover everybody. But who knows? Sunday night, game by itself. Maybe I can catch a red eye Saturday night, Sunday morning.
Oh, that'd be dope. Yeah, come on. Like you watch the, we'll have all the game. We'll be out there at noon. We'll have the TVs going. You'll be able to watch every game. And I'll be watching them too. So
good stuff. We just dropped the link to Spear Addicts as well. Chris, what's going on?
Well, to be completely honest with you, James and I are doing pretty much the same thing. I'm not chilling as much, and he is going to be on the show tomorrow, unless he tells me he's not. But to be completely honest with you, I'm hoping that we land a specific recruit tomorrow. And I'm trying to, if that's what's to happen, I'm trying to get them on for an interview immediately after. They told me that tomorrow was one of their potential days that they could do it. Just depends on how some of their stuff works out. So if it works out, then we'll have the newest recruit for Florida State on. If not, we'll have a show. I don't know exactly what I'm going to go with yet, but I'm trying to make sure that I land this kid. As long as he commits tomorrow, then we have him on. I don't want to have him on because then people are going to know, or they're going to be suspicious that that's the guy that was going to commit. So if he doesn't commit tomorrow, I won't have him on. But if he does, then I will have him on. But a little bit about the tailgate. James and I went into the bowl game last year for a quarter and a half, and we felt like it was such a better deal being out at the tailgate with the TVs that we left the game. I mean, I personally don't mind going into games. I love Doak, and that's where I'm always going to go to those games a lot. But the bowl game, I don't necessarily wanted to be there. So come watch the games with us in the lots. It's better. And James is 100% correct. Hearing Leroy and hearing James himself break down what's going on the field is by far more fun than sitting in the stadium beside people that are probably yelling against your team. But that's all I got going on.
Well, I'm a nerd that likes to see replays. So I like to see the play. Then I like to see 2 replays, and I don't get that in the stadium. Sometimes you get that on the replay board, but not always. And yeah, absolutely. Great stuff with James and Chris. Is there anything we missed? I don't think so.
I would say, just as a forewarning, because people did take Diggs and Gant entering the transfer portal kind of hard. They took it as like, what's going on? And some people aren't in depth understanding that this is necessary. The amount of players that are leaving attrition wise it's needed. I know there might be a name that you really like, but none, in my opinion, that are on this team right now, unless it's a Jordan Travis, which wouldn't happen. But none should hurt more than Trayshawn Ward, and he already did it. So get ready. There's going to be some more guys from Florida State enter the portal, but don't freak out. It's needed. We want this to happen because we need this to happen. But one thing that I will touch on a little bit is someone asked me about Robert Scott because he just had surgery not too long ago. They're worried about the guard position. He's fine. He's actually going to be back full swing at it summer. So he was just held out for spring. He was still working out. He just could not participate in actual play because he was in a boot. But everyone that knows this, if you're in a boot and you can walk on it and you're not using crutches, you're all right.
This is who I want to hit you guys up on. We heard so much about Fentrell Cypress when he was signed and how good he was out of Virginia, where obviously nobody watched him play. 14 passes defense last year. Obviously, you guys haven't been able to see every snap and all that at practice, but are you hearing good things and as good as advertised?
I mean, I've been hearing a lot of good things about his secondary as a whole, but he is definitely somebody that we're looking to rely heavily on. But Florida State at its peak, at its best, has always been a 2 deep rotation on defense. So, and we're going to run 3 corners, but 3 corners for the most part because of the style of offense in this day. And you'll see variations of a 4-2-5, or it may look like a really one safety high, and really almost like an old school 4-4-D. But Cypress is one of those guys, but actually somebody I don't think everybody, I noticed this the first day, was freaking Greedy Vance. Like, Greedy Vance has played so well that it's made it tough for Cypress to just be able to come in and just even take a slot corner job, as well as your other star was AZ. Azariah has been doing very, very well, too. And he has the traditional build of what you want. He's a long, lean corner that can run. So I think you'll see just a bunch of guys that they're going to be able to throw at people and matchup guys. So it's funny to talk about this because nobody ever really speaks on this with football. So, like, even though I think Greedy Vance did well, Greedy is also still one of our more petite corners. But let's say we're going up against a team that, Wake Forest being one of those, that have 2 6'4" wide receivers that are over 200 pounds. That's not a situation we want to consistently put Greedy Vance in, but that is a situation where we have 3 to 4 corners where we can kind of rotate and continue to throw at these guys while their people are getting worn down. So that's where that is. And then and again, just the biggest pieces that are stole the show are your Jared Verse, Patrick Paytons, the guys. The only transfer that I really think hasn't really shown us what we really need would be the kid from South Carolina. And like right now, I don't think I'm not saying get rid of him. Obviously, he has a few years, but he's not panning out to the measure in which we need him to pan out for right now.
Florida State fans, I apologize for contaminating your colors with the word Miami, but that's our show next, 7 p.m. Eastern time over on the Miami channel.
James. I might check that one out.
Yes.
I was on a Miami space yesterday.
I called you into it.
Yeah, Chris called me into it. There was some friendly banter between some of us, and I feel confident in my dough. And I guess I can't use that because that's what got my I feel confident in the person that I have in the fight. So I like my Seminoles, and I went and the guys are betting recruiting, and I'm like, you know what? I don't really care about young boys like that, but let's do this. I'll bet you Miami won't finish top. I think it was top 5 in recruiting. If you bet me Florida State, Miami. And I got a bite on that, and we're betting pretty high, pretty decent. I didn't want to make anybody overly uncomfortable, but I also wanted to. I don't gamble like that, so I need the excitement to not back out. So they helped me that. Then another guy came in, and unfortunately, from some Miami fans, they don't feel bold enough to back themselves and to win the fight, so they want to bring other people to fight. And unfortunately, that guy's going to lose money too because he's betting LSU. And I'm like, cool, I'm taking that bet too all day. And I told him I want my money. So it is going to be, and it's not about it, it's just about the principle. So I like Miami fans, but I think right now they're clamoring for anything. So, but they're going to be okay one day.
I'm going to make a comment real quick about Cypress just because it was a question. Yeah. And then I'm going to ask Mark and James a question, which I know James has answered because I've asked him before, but y'all might not have heard it because you weren't watching my show. So first off, Cypress has covered Johnny Wilson when Johnny was healthy. He covered Johnny Wilson by far the best out of our corners. AZ leads the corners in interceptions, and Greedy leads the corners in fumble recovery. But Cypress is only one behind of each of those categories behind both of them. So Cypress has definitely been an impact in the backfield, and I think Cypress is going to be a huge help to what Florida State's backfield is going to do this year. But my question for Mark is, because this question was asked multiple times today on the space, who is the best team in the state of Florida right now, based off of last year and based off of what it looks like it's going to be this year?
Well, I will tell people, because I'm always pushing content, is that in a couple of days, I'm going to have my program rankings. So that's going to be 1 through 133 across the country. So we will deliver that, but I will make that statement right now. I think this is the easiest answer than it's been to that question in years. And it's Florida State. Because I think I made the statement and have a couple times on this show that what I've been intrigued by for the last 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it's been, doing all these different shows with the Florida teams, is that there always seems to be like a little 3-month or 4-month wave of momentum in one direction. Okay, the Gators got some really good recruits. They're coming off a nice Dan Mullen season. Okay, they're the team. No, they're not. Miami's got a surge. Florida State's got a surge. And they've kind of been trading places all over the place. And really, Florida was the only one that had that nice little stretch with Mullen for 3 consecutive years on the field. And this is the first time that it's clear to me right now that it's been in a long time. Florida State's the best program, and they're starting to back that up on the recruiting path as well. Yeah. Florida State right now is a top 10 to 15 program, and I'm not saying team, kind of making it the distinction between just the 22, 23 team and the program. And Miami and Florida, I'm not talking historically. I'm talking about right now. They're more, until they prove otherwise, they're more like top 25 to 35 programs. And they didn't play like that last year. They didn't play that high, but of course I'm going to respect the talent on the roster and their resources and their abilities to get better quicker than most teams.
James, if you were to rank 1, 2, and 3, because I did it, would you rank Miami or Florida at 2?
I'd rank Miami at 2, and the reason why is because of quarterback. We don't know. Well, I have to say, I like Ja'Carry. It just hasn't done. It's just very difficult right now to judge him based off of what we've seen. But if you have, you have Tyler Van Dyke. So if Tyler Van Dyke is able to come in and forget last year and find, if they play a wide open offense where he can throw the ball down the field, then I think Miami is actually a team that is a bowl ready team. If Ja'Carry Brown has to be the quarterback, I think they're a 5-win team at max. Just looking at where they're strong, not even where they're strong, is really looking at their schedule. Miami has, their best running back is coming off of ACL. I don't really know what they have at wide receiver. It doesn't look great. But I do know they have some good defensive end, and they do have some talent there, but it's very difficult their corners are still depleted, secondary still depleted, linebacker core isn't anywhere near what it needs to be. But again, with that offense, with the ability, I think they're better. Florida right now, I know they're going to try to get somebody on a grad transfer, but if they have to go out there with Graham Mertz, it's lights out with that schedule that they have. It's brutal. They've got South Carolina at South Carolina. I believe they're at Tennessee. They play LSU. They play Georgia. They play Florida State. Kentucky is still one of the better, a well-coached team. They go out to Utah. And that's me just saying those 7 teams without mentioning the fact they lost to Vanderbilt last year with a potential top 10 pick. And I know I'm missing somebody that's a duck, but I know they'll beat two of the teams on their schedule because they're not any good. But the teams that actually have pulses, they've either lost to or they don't measure up well with what it is now. So if I had to just go by wins and losses, then I would definitely go in Miami's direction. But Florida, but what it does look like what Florida has is they do have their quarterbacks of the future lined up. I still like ours better, but at least it always feels good to have those pieces. And they're both going to at the end of the day, I made a joke about them, but Miami will finish minimum top 15 in recruiting. They're going to finish off fine. It's just it's fun to pick on them when they're down. But right now, if any fan base is legitimately, like, again, games have to be played. But based off of last season, based on what we've seen, based on what's entered the transfer portal, based on not the spring scrimmages or the showcases, but even the spring practices that we've seen, if you're a confident Miami fan and you're a truly confident Florida fan, I encourage you, forget the DMs on YouTube. At Big Game James _36, please DM me your Cash App and let's bet. If you're truly confident in these guys, I want to reward you for your confidence if it pans out. But I could not, in blind faith, believe in these teams.
Last thing I'll mention tonight is honored this question from Mark Simons asking, what is the national perspective on Mike Norvell? Well, I will tell you, I will preface my answer by saying one of the things I'm disappointed in so-called journalism or analysts out there, not so much journalists, but analysts out there, is that they're more reactionary than visionary. And they basically just tell us what we already know. So when a coach is down, they tell us he's no good, he can't handle the program, he can't handle that job. And then obviously when he turns it around, suddenly he's really good at what he does. And that's been what's out there about Mike Norvell. Instead of being able to interview someone, look at their work, look at the indicators and say, you know what, it's not quite turned around for this coach yet, but look at the indicators, look at what he's done elsewhere. We see it happening. You rarely see that type of analysis out of anyone. So I'll flat out say that it's pretty obvious to see what the national perspective on Mike Norvell is. It's a complete 180 from what it was a year ago. Is he any different? No, but he's turned it around and now he's got proof of concept working on his side because of a 6-game winning streak. So people look at him as a good coach, whereas a year ago they looked at him as he's probably in over his head and he's probably not going to get this done.
And I think that's fair. My thing is this: is Mike Norvell a good coach? I think if you get a top part of the Power 5 job, you're naturally a decent coach. But is he in the upper echelon of coaches? Like, is he a top 25 coach? I think you're crazy if you don't think he's top 25. I'd argue top 15. But to get into that top 10 is about consistency. So and this is the best year to figure out what Mike Norvell really is. With expectations, you achieve what the goals are for your roster? That's one thing. And then after that, the next season will prove how great a coach he really is. Can you manage the talent? And then what can you do when the talent leaves? Will you be able to play in a college football playoff? Did you go to a 5-win team? Because we've seen that before over the years, even with good coaches. They'll have a great year. A lot of seniors will leave. Then they won't make a bowl game, but then they'll go back. That's what makes what Bobby Bowden did. I think people don't respect it enough, just how consistent he was. 36 straight bowl games. That means, like, I'm putting in perspective. My entire life up until when I was 36 years old, my entire life, basically, I'd never seen Florida State not make a bowl game. Like, that means then 3 straight national championships, really more, because they technically played. Florida in '95 was considered a national championship. The '94 game was considered a national championship, and then obviously we won '93. So if you just look, '92, I believe, no, '92 Miami won it. We lost. But if you look at that decade of the '90s, 8 of those games that they played in would have been considered national championship games. There was no drop off. It's just I'm amazing the level of consistency. So that's where Norvell has to prove. Is he that guy?
I scurried to my coach's rankings as soon as James said anybody who ranks Norvell outside the top 25 or top 15 is crazy. I'm at 22. So
outside the top 25, I said I think he's a top.
Oh, that's right. Coach. Okay, I barely make it inside crazy. I just have to see it. I just got to see it backed up. I've seen it once, and they really didn't beat anyone that good. If I'm going to be blunt about it, if I'm going to be direct, they were such a better team. They improved so much, but I do want to see them beat somebody better than who's the best team they beat last year? Florida? Oklahoma? Those would be the 2 best, right?
LSU.
I'm guessing Louisville?
LSU.
Oh, LSU. Okay. LSU was, by far the best team they beat. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay.
But that's fair. That's extremely fair. So I actually agree. I think James is correct. I think he is a top 15 coach right now, but if he backs it up this season, that solidifies it. But I also agree with Mark that who was the best team Florida State beat last year? And really, you can only look to one team. If you would have beat Clemson, then you could have said you beat 2 really good teams, but we didn't. So both statements are extremely fair. So I'm somewhere in the middle of that.
All right, folks, good stuff with James and with Chris. You two make this show go on Wednesday night, so we appreciate it. James is going to take some more time off. He's going to rest his old soul there, and he'll be back, though. But we want everybody to take this opportunity, as both James and Chris told you about, to get on this offer for this tailgate coming up, so people can lock in their spots right now, right?
Yes. That, and then actually, Chris, I don't know if you got time, hit me up offline, but we have parking. So one thing our tailgate has that nobody else's tailgate has is actual parking. And trust me, if you saw the bowl game parking prices, our prices are way better, because we're not really trying to make any money off of you. We're just trying to make sure that it's as convenient as possible. So we're trying to our goal is to have 1,000 people on Church Street where we're at. So it's 5 lots, so it's not just one lot, but it's 5 lots. We don't have 1,000 parking spaces, but we do have some parking spaces that are relatively close to the state. They're not relatively. You could throw a rock at the stadium. And you want to lock in as we get closer. We're going to increase the price just to make people pay, so we can have a correct number so we can feed everybody correctly. But it's all you can eat, all you can drink, and it is kid friendly. So we will have literally a kids zone where there'll be gaming trucks and stuff like that for people to do. So, like I said, if you don't go to the game, come to the tailgate. trust me, you're gonna have a blast. You may start going to Tallahassee to just go to tailgates and experience the culture that is Florida State and LSU. I'm not even gonna lie, man. Those fans are so great. That's the school I would not mind my sons going to, because I wouldn't mind like just going to a regular LSU game. Like, I know they're going to feed you. I know they're going to take care of you. Like, they were so nice. We had some people join us with the one we did in New Orleans. And if you're an LSU fan, it's going to be good. We're going to compete, and then we're going to eat, drink, and be merry afterwards.
Nice. All right, James. Appreciate it. Chris, thank you so much for being here, man.
Absolutely.
Next Wednesday, folks, 6 p.m. Eastern, be here. Bring a friend or 50, and we'll see you then.